Before the silver burned brightest, before the moon witnessed her transformation, before the pack understood what they had awakened, Sera Hartwell believed obedience was survival. She believed silence kept her safe. She believed that if she made herself small enough, invisible enough, forgettable enough, the world might let her live. For 23 years, she had been the wolf who never spoke out of turn, who accepted every dismissal like a gift, who smiled when warriors looked through her as though she were glass. She had trained her wolf to stay buried so deep that sometimes she forgot it existed at all. But memory has teeth, and tonight, kneeling in the rain with Elder Hollis Thorne reading charges that would end her life, Sera could feel those teeth beginning to bite. The ceremonial grounds of Steelcrest Pack spread before her like a killing floor. 300 wolves assembled in perfect formation, ranked by blood and battle prowess, standing witness beneath a moon so full it seemed close enough to touch. Torches blazed in geometric patterns around the stone platform where Elder Council sat in judgment. Rain fell in sheets, turning the packed earth to mud, soaking through the white ceremonial gown that clung to her skin like a burial shroud. She could not stop shaking. Elder Thorne's voice carried across the clearing with the authority of a man who had survived 67 winters and more pack wars than most warriors would see in 3 lifetimes. He stood before the altar with shoulders squared and spine straight despite his years, reading from the book of pack law as though scripture could justify what was about to happen. Omega Sera Hartwell, you are charged with insubordination, unauthorized bond claim to an alpha, dereliction of duty. The sentence, as prescribed by ancient law and pack tradition, is 20 lashes and permanent exile from Steelcrest territory. The words landed like claws tearing through flesh. Each syllable carved pieces from her chest, from her lungs, from her ability to draw breath. She kept her eyes on the mud beneath her knees, on the white silk now brown with earth and shame, on anything except the figure standing 20 feet away at the head of the warrior formation. Alpha Kane Merrick, leader of Steelcrest Pack, watched her kneel in the rain and said nothing. His silence was the cruelest blow of all. 18 months earlier, Sera would not have believed any of this possible. 18 months earlier, she had been invisible, and invisibility had been safety. The healing house at Steelcrest occupied the stone structure near the eastern border, where injured wolves came when training fights went too far, or border skirmishes left warriors bleeding and broken. The building was old, constructed from mountain granite by ancestors who understood that packs needed healers as much as they needed fighters. Sera had worked there since her 18th winter, learning the herbs that closed wounds and the poultices that drew poison, becoming skilled in the particular medicine required to treat wolves whose bodies healed faster than humans, but could still die from silver or fire or injuries too severe for even shifter constitution to overcome. She worked the night shifts because no one else wanted them, because Omegas did not refuse assignments, because 3 hours past midnight was when the worst cases came stumbling through the doors. Border patrol injuries, challenge fights that went beyond first blood, the occasional dominance dispute that left wolves damaged in ways that required healing they could not seek during daylight when the pack might witness their weakness. She had learned to ask no questions. Tonight, she was preparing healing drafts when the door crashed open and 4 warriors carried their alpha inside on a makeshift litter of woven branches and torn cloaks. Kane Merrick was 42 winters old and looked like violence carved into flesh. 6 feet 3 inches of muscle and scar tissue and controlled fury. His hair was dark except for silver threading through the temples, worn long in the traditional warrior style but bound back with leather cord. His eyes were the color of winter ice, pale blue and merciless, the kind of eyes that could watch wolves die and not flinch because flinching got more wolves killed. Tonight those eyes were clouded with pain, but his jaw remained set and his breathing remained controlled as his warriors transferred him to the healing table. Deep claw wounds across his chest and shoulder, defensive marks on his forearms, the signature injuries of a territorial challenge from a rival pack's champion. The challenger? Sera asked quietly, already pulling clean cloths and preparing her workspace. Dead, one of the warriors replied. Alpha killed him, but not before the bastard landed these strikes. Kane's hand shot out and gripped the warrior's wrist. The border, he said through gritted teeth. Secure the eastern perimeter. Northern wolves may test us if they sense weakness. Alpha, you need treatment, the warrior protested. I said secure the border, Kane repeated, and his voice carried the particular tone of an alpha whose orders were absolute. Move. They moved. Sera found herself alone with the most dangerous wolf in Steelcrest territory bleeding on her healing table at 3 hours past midnight with no assistance and no time to waste. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something click into place inside her mind. Some part of her that had been waiting its entire life to be needed for something that mattered. Her hands stopped shaking. Her breathing steadied. The world narrowed to anatomy and injury, and the systematic work required to keep an alpha from bleeding out in her healing house. She did not ask permission. She simply began working. First, she cleaned the wounds with water drawn from the sacred spring, murmuring the old prayers her mother had taught her about honoring the moon's gift of healing. Then she applied pressure to slow the bleeding, her small hands somehow sufficient to the task. The claw marks were deep, tearing through muscle to bone in some places. She worked methodically, stitching torn tissue with threads spun from spider silk and blessed under the full moon, her needle moving with precision born from 5 years of practice. Kane watched her throughout the procedure with those ice-blue eyes, tracking every movement, cataloging every decision. When she finished binding the wounds with cloth soaked in healing herbs and stepped back to clean her instruments, he spoke for the first time since his warriors had left. "You have steady hands, healer, wasted on Omega designation." The words struck her like a blow and a blessing all at once. No one at Steelcrest spoke to Omegas except to give orders. Certainly no one offered observations that sounded almost like respect. "Thank you, Alpha," she said, because protocol demanded acknowledgement even when her mind was reeling. He sat up slowly, testing his shoulders' range of motion, nodding approval at her work. "What is your name?" "Sera Hartwell, Alpha." "How long have you served the healing house, Hartwell?" 5 years, Alpha. "And before that?" She hesitated, uncertain why an Alpha would care about an Omega's history, uncertain if honesty was permitted when speaking to someone who could end her with a word. "I was raised here, Alpha. My mother served as healer before me." "Did she?" It was not a question. Something shifted in his expression, some recognition or remembrance that passed too quickly to interpret. "You are dismissed, Hartwell. I will return tomorrow at sunset for fresh bindings." She fled before he could change his mind, before he could ask questions she had no safe answers for, before the careful walls she had built around her wolf could crack beneath the pressure of his attention. She did not know then that those walls were already crumbling, that the moment his blood had touched her hands, something ancient and inevitable had begun to wake. The bond ignited 3 nights later during the second treatment. Kane had returned for wound cleaning and fresh bindings, arriving alone as the sun set and the pack settled into evening routines. Sera had been carefully removing his old dressings when her fingers brushed against unmarked skin just below the injury site. Heat exploded through her veins like wildfire. Her breath caught. Her wolf, always so carefully subdued, surged forward with a desperation that terrified her. The bond snapped into place so violently she gasped aloud and stumbled backward, her carefully organized workspace scattering across the floor. Kane had frozen, his entire body going rigid, one hand braced against the healing table as though he needed the support. When he turned to look at her, his eyes were blazing with gold fire, his wolf pressing so close to the surface that she could see it in the sharp planes of his face, in the sudden tension of muscles ready to shift. "You feel it," he said. "Not a question." A statement rough with shock and something that sounded almost like anger. She managed to nod, unable to form words past the ache building in her chest, past the pull that wanted to drag her toward him, past the bond screaming "mate, mate, mate" in a voice she had never been allowed to acknowledge. Kane looked at her for 3 heartbeats longer, his expression unreadable, his control visible in every line of his body. Then he stood and walked out of the healing house without another word, leaving her shaking and alone and drowning in a connection she had no right to feel. But he came back, not that night, not the next day. But 4 days later, when Sera was walking the forest path that marked the old boundary between packlands and wilderness, he appeared from the shadows like a phantom materializing from darkness. She had been sitting on the ancient stone wall, watching the moon rise over mountains that stretched beyond her permitted territory, trying to understand what the bond meant, trying to calm a wolf that had never disobeyed before tonight. "I did not expect this," Kane said quietly, and his voice held none of the alpha command she was accustomed to hearing. "I did not expect you." "I do not understand, Alpha," Sera whispered, He moved closer, but maintained careful distance, as though proximity might trigger something neither of them could control. The bond is real, undeniable, but complicated. She waited, knowing better than to speak unless given permission. The council has plans, alliances that matter more than individual connections. If they know the bond exists before circumstances are secured, they will use it against us both, against us. The words settled into her chest like stones, heavy and permanent. I need time, Hartwell. Time to navigate pack politics. Time to establish protections. Can you give me that? She should have questioned. Should have demanded explanations or assurances, or some proof that his caution was protection rather than shame. But she had been raised to obey, trained to accept whatever scraps of attention were offered, taught that questioning authority led to punishment swift and severe. Yes, Alpha, she said, I can give you time. Relief flickered across his face, there and gone in an instant. Good. Then we proceed carefully. No public acknowledgement, no visible connection. When the moment is right, when defenses are in place, we will make the bond official before the moon and the pack. She believed him. Moon helper, she believed every word. The secret relationship that followed existed in the spaces between pack duty and hierarchy. Meetings at abandoned watchtowers where borders met wilderness. Conversations conducted in low voices beneath the sound of wind through ancient pines and the distant calls of night hunters. But it was not romance Cain offered. It was something far more valuable. He taught her to see the world through alpha eyes. 3 weeks after the bond ignited, he began bringing her along when he walked the territory boundaries, teaching her to read the signs other wolves left, showing her how to identify weaknesses in their defensive positions. He explained pack dynamics not as rigid hierarchy, but as complex web of alliances and obligations, debts owed and favors traded. You see patterns most wolves miss, he told her one night, while they stood on the northern ridge overlooking the valley where rival pack territories began. You observe without being observed. That is valuable beyond measure. She had never been called valuable at anything in her entire life. The connection between them deepened in ways that terrified and exhilarated her. Cain would appear at the healing house late at night, materializing from shadows like he belonged to the darkness itself. Sometimes he came for conversation, asking her opinion on pack disputes or territorial concerns, actually listening when she offered insights that surprised him with their clarity. Other times he came simply to be near her, sitting in comfortable silence while she prepared healing drafts or organized supplies. Those were the nights Sera treasured most, when the weight of leadership lifted from his shoulders and she glimpsed the wolf beneath the alpha mask. He would tell her stories about his youth, about challenges he had faced, about the loneliness of command that no one else could understand. You carry more than your pack knows, she said one night while mixing herbs under moonlight streaming through the window. I can see it in how your shoulders tense when anyone approaches, in how you check every entrance before settling. You are always waiting for the next threat. That is what being alpha means, Cain replied quietly. Constant vigilance. The moment I stop watching is the moment someone I am sworn to protect dies because I failed to see danger coming. But who protects you? Sera asked, turning to face him. Who watches for your threats? Who carries your burdens when they become too heavy? He looked at her with something raw and vulnerable in his expression. No one. That is the price of leadership. I stand alone, or I stand nowhere. You do not have to stand alone, she whispered. Not with me. The air between them grew charged, electric with possibility. For one breathless moment, Sera thought he might close the distance, might claim the bond that sang between them, might choose her over politics and duty and all the careful calculations that governed his world. But then his jaw tightened and he stepped back, control slamming into place like a fortress gate. Not yet, he said, and his voice carried equal parts longing and iron discipline. When the time is right, when I can protect you properly, when no one can use this bond to hurt you, then I will claim what the moon has given us, but not before. She wanted to argue, wanted to demand that love should be enough, that bonds mattered more than politics. But she had been raised to understand that wanting and having were separated by chasms wider than individual desire could bridge. So she nodded and returned to her herbs, ignoring the way her wolf whimpered at the lost opportunity, telling herself that patience was wisdom and waiting was strength. The nights continued. Secret meetings that felt stolen from time itself, Cain teaching her to read the stars for navigation, showing her which constellations guided wolves home when landmarks failed. Sera sharing her knowledge of healing, explaining which plants closed wounds and which ones brought fever down, demonstrating techniques her mother had taught her before memory began. They grew to know each other in ways that went beyond physical attraction or mate bond instinct. Sera learned that Cain feared failure more than death, that he carried the names of every wolf lost under his leadership like stones in his chest, that beneath the cold authority was a wolf who wanted desperately to be worthy of the trust his pack placed in him. Cain discovered that Sera possessed a mind as sharp as any warrior's blade, that she saw patterns in pack dynamics others missed entirely, that her years of invisibility had given her insights into wolf nature that no amount of dominance could teach. There was one night, roughly 2 months into their secret bond, when everything nearly shattered. They had been walking the eastern border, discussing nothing of consequence, simply existing in each other's presence. The moon was waning, stars bright enough to cast shadows, air crisp with the promise of coming winter. Sera stumbled on loose stone, and Cain caught her reflexively, his hands steady on her arms. They froze that way, close enough that she could feel heat radiating from his skin, close enough that his scent wrapped around her like shelter, close enough that the bond between them pulled so hard it felt like physical pain. His eyes met hers, blazing gold in the starlight, his wolf pressing so close to the surface that she could feel its hunger matching her own. For one infinite moment the world held its breath, balanced on the edge of choice. Then Cain released her and stepped back, his breathing controlled, but his hands shaking slightly. "I cannot," he said roughly. "Not like this, not hidden in shadows as though you are something to be ashamed of. When I claim you, it will be before the pack and the moon and every wolf in the territory. You deserve nothing less." The words should have comforted her. Instead, they felt like postponement, like promises made in lieu of action, like the kind of thing wolves said when they meant never, but lacked courage to speak the truth. She should have recognized the warning then, should have understood that a wolf who would not claim his mate for political reasons was a wolf who valued politics more than bonds. But she was young and hopeful and desperately in love with possibility. So she smiled and nodded and told herself that patience was a virtue and waiting proved devotion. Meanwhile, signs accumulated that she refused to see. The way Cain tensed whenever Elder Thorne mentioned the Northern Coalition threat. How conversations about alliance proposals made his expression close like shutters slamming. The night he pulled away when her hand brushed his, muttering about propriety and timing and circumstances that were never quite right. "You could have been counsel," Cain said during one of their last meetings before everything fell apart. There was regret in his voice, heavy and genuine. "If you had been born Beta or Alpha, you would be advising the elders instead of sorting herbs. You have a mind that could reshape this pack." "But I am Omega," she replied, because that was the truth that defined her existence. He looked at her for a long moment, something fierce and protective and helplessly frustrated burning in his expression. "Yes, you are, and that is their blindness, not your limitation." But it was his limitation, too, though neither of them would acknowledge it. He could see her worth, could recognize her intelligence, could value her insights and treasure her presence. But he could not choose her when politics demanded sacrifice, could not place individual connection above pack survival, could not be the wolf who stood beside her when the cost became too high. She understood that now, kneeling in the rain with his denial still echoing in her ears. But in those secret nights beneath the stars, she had believed love would be enough, had trusted that bonds mattered more than politics, had convinced herself that the moon goddess would not give her a mate who would destroy her. The moon goddess, it seemed, had other lessons to teach. She wanted to believe the bond was strengthening between them, wanted to believe the careful distance he maintained in public was strategy rather than shame. But there were signs she should have noticed, warnings she chose to ignore because acknowledging them would mean confronting truths she was not ready to face. The way Cain tensed whenever Elder Thorne mentioned alliances with neighboring packs, how he changed the subject when she asked about official recognition ceremonies. The night he pulled away when she reached for his hand, his jaw tight, his eyes distant. "After the territory is secure," he had said. "When threats are neutralized. Not when we are ready. When threats are neutralized, But she had been too desperate to question, too hopeful to doubt, too in love with the possibility of mattering to someone powerful enough to make mattering safe. The world shattered on a Tuesday in the season of turning leaves. Sera was organizing supplies in the healing house when Mira Reyes, a young Omega who worked the day shifts, burst through the door with panic in her eyes. "Sera, you need to hear this. Word just came from the Border Scouts. Northern Coalition is massing forces. Over 200 wolves. They are preparing for invasion." The words took several seconds to process. Northern Coalition controlled the territories 50 miles north, a powerful pack with a history of territorial aggression and a reputation for overwhelming force. If they were mobilizing in those numbers, it meant war. When? Sera asked, her mind already calculating how many wounded the healing house could accommodate, how much supplies they would need, how to organize triage for mass casualties. "Scouts estimate 10 days, Mira said. "Maybe less. Elder Council is convening emergency session now. They are talking about alliances." Alliances. The word hung in the air like smoke. Sera felt something cold settle in her stomach, some instinct that recognized danger even when her conscious mind refused to name it. She wanted to dismiss the feeling as paranoia, wanted to believe that Kane's careful planning over the past months had been preparation for exactly this moment, that the bond between them would be revealed now as strategic asset rather than political liability. She wanted to believe many things. That night, Kane did not come to their meeting place at the old watchtower. He did not send word. Complete silence, as though she had ceased to exist the moment larger concerns demanded his attention. The next morning, an honor guard arrived from Eastern clans with 40 warriors and a proposal that would save the pack or destroy it, depending on perspective. Catherine Voss stepped from the lead carriage with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority and the careful control of someone who knew she was walking into hostile territory. She was 31 winters old, daughter of Eastern Alpha Marcus Voss, trained as a healer like Sera, but respected as a strategist and diplomat. Her presence at Steelcrest could mean only one thing: alliance through blood bond, the oldest and most binding form of pact treaty. Sera watched from the healing house window as Catherine was escorted to the Great Hall, where Elder Council and senior warriors were assembled. She watched Kane emerge from the Alpha's quarters, dressed in formal leathers, walking toward a meeting that would decide all their futures. She did not know then that he had already made his choice. The council convened behind closed doors, but word spread through the pack the way it always did, carried by servants and guards who stood outside chambers and heard enough to piece together truth. The Northern Coalition threat was real. Scouts confirmed 200 warriors massing at the border. Supply lines established. Attack imminent. Eastern clans offered 150 reinforcements, experienced fighters, provisions, everything needed to turn certain defeat into possible victory. The price was alliance through mating bond between Steelcrest Alpha and Eastern Alpha's daughter. Kane had 3 days to decide. Sera learned about the timeline from Mira, who delivered the news with tears in her eyes and fury in her voice. "They are forcing his hand. They know about the bond with you. They must know. But they do not care because numbers matter more than hearts." "Maybe Kane will refuse," Sera whispered, but even she could hear the desperate hope in her own words. Mira looked at her with something like pity. "Sera, he is Alpha. His first duty is to the pack. He will choose survival. He will always choose survival." For 3 days, Sera waited. She worked her shifts in the healing house. She maintained her routines. She did not sleep, could not eat, existed in a state of suspension between hope and horror, while Kane made calculations about acceptable losses and necessary sacrifices. He did not speak to her during those 3 days, did not send messages, did not acknowledge her existence. Complete silence, as though the bond between them was something that could be turned off when convenient. On the 3rd day, Elder Thorne made the announcement. Mating ceremony scheduled for the next full moon. Alpha Kane Merrick and healer Catherine Voss. Alliance secured, Steelcrest saved. And Sera understood with perfect clarity that she had been a placeholder all along. A temporary comfort. A secret kept in shadows because acknowledging her would have complicated politics and threatened alliances. But the bond did not care about politics. The bond existed independent of calculations and necessary sacrifices and the cold logic of wolves who measured worth in strength rather than connection. The bond stretched between them like a living thing, vibrating with pain every time she saw him across the compound, screaming with agony every time she remembered his promises. Stand beside me when defenses are secure. He had never specified who would be standing beside him when security was finally achieved. The ceremony was scheduled for sunset on the night of the full moon. Traditional timing, designed to invoke the blessing of the moon goddess and the witness of the pack. Sera was not invited. Omegas attended ceremonies only when their presence served specific purpose, and her purpose had been fulfilled the moment Catherine Voss agreed to alliance terms. But at midday, 2 warriors appeared at the healing house with orders that made her blood run cold. Report to ceremonial grounds at sunset. Elder Council requires your presence. She understood immediately. This was not invitation. This was summons. They were going to make an example of her. The walk to ceremonial grounds felt like a death march. Rain had begun falling at noon, steady and cold, turning the paths to mud and the sky to iron gray. Sera wore her healing robes because she owned nothing else appropriate for formal assembly. Simple brown wool, functional, the garment of someone who served but did not lead. The grounds were already filled when she arrived. 300 wolves in formation, warriors standing witness in ranks organized by strength and prowess. Healers and craftsmen clustered in designated sections. Elder council seated on the stone platform that had witnessed countless ceremonies over generations of Steelcrest history. And at the center of it all, standing before the altar with his back straight and his face carved from stone, Alpha Cain Merrick waited beside Catherine Voss for the ceremony that would bind them forever. Sera was positioned front and center, 10 feet from the altar, isolated from the formations around her. A spotlight. Everyone would see what happened next. That was the point. Elder Hollis Thorne stood and began reading charges before the ceremony could commence, his voice carrying across the assembled pack with the weight of absolute authority. Omega Sera Hartwell. Step forward. She moved on legs that felt disconnected from her body, on autopilot born from years of obedience training, until she stood before the altar with rain soaking through her robes and 300 pairs of eyes burning into her back. You are charged with insubordination, Thorne continued. Unauthorized bond claim to an alpha. These crimes undermine pack hierarchy and threaten our security. Do you deny these charges? Sera's eyes found Cain's face. She was looking for something, anything, some sign that he would intervene, that he would speak truth, that the past months had meant more than convenient distraction. His expression remained neutral, cold, the face he wore when making decisions that required sacrifice. I felt the bond, she said, and hated how small her voice sounded. The moon goddess does not lie. The moon goddess did not sanction this bond, Thorne replied. What you felt was confusion. The desperate fantasy of an Omega seeking status above her station. Murmurs rippled through the assembled pack. Not shock, entertainment. They were watching someone fall, and falls were always more interesting than rises. That is not true, Sera protested, but even to her own ears it sounded weak. Thorne turned to Cain. Alpha Merrick, did you at any time feel mate bond connection with this Omega? The clearing held its breath. Cain met her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked away, his jaw clenched so tight she could see muscle jumping beneath skin. No, he said, I felt nothing. The words detonated inside her chest like wildfire. Each syllable carved pieces from her heart, from her lungs, from her ability to believe that anything in this world was real or true or worth fighting for. Therefore, Thorne continued, Omega Hartwell is guilty of all charges. Sentence is 20 lashes and permanent exile from Steelcrest territory. 20 lashes would scar her permanently, might kill her, would certainly mark her as damaged goods in any pack that might consider accepting her. This is barbaric, someone murmured from the formations. This is necessary, Elder Thorne countered. Pack discipline demands consequences. She will kneel. Warriors stepped forward. Strong hands gripped her shoulders and forced her to her knees in the mud, where her brown robes absorbed rain and earth and shame. A warrior emerged from the formation carrying the ceremonial lash, leather braided with silver wire, designed to wound deeply, to ensure lessons were never forgotten. He took position behind her. Sera kept her eyes on Cain, even now, even after his denial. Some desperate part of her was still waiting for him to intervene, to stop this madness, to remember the nights at the watchtower when he had called her valuable. But Cain stood motionless beside Catherine Voss, watching Sera kneel in the rain like she was a stranger. Please, Sera whispered. Kane turned his head away. Something inside Sera broke. Not her spirit, not her will. Something older, deeper, something that had been sleeping her entire life beneath layers of forced submission and learned helplessness. Her wolf stirred. For the first time in 23 years, her wolf did not cower or hide or bow to dominance. She rose slowly, powerfully, with fury that had been building since the night Sera's mother died, protecting secrets that should never have needed protection. "Enough!" the wolf growled inside Sera's mind, and the voice was not gentle or small. It was thunder and moonlight and ancient rage. The warrior raised the lash. Rain poured. Torches crackled. 300 wolves held collective breath. Sera's hands sank into mud, fingernails scraping stone beneath earth. Heat exploded in her chest, not the heat of bond, but something far more primal. Power surged through her veins like molten silver. The lash descended. It never landed. Because in the heartbeat before leather met flesh, Sera's wolf finally stopped waiting for permission and took control. The transformation ripped through her like lightning, tearing the sky apart. Pain exploded in every nerve, every bone, every cell. Her spine arched violently. Bones cracked and reshaped with sounds that echoed across the clearing like breaking trees. Her scream tore into howl, raw and primal and furious, a sound no Omega should be able to make. Silver light erupted from her skin. Not gentle glow of normal shift, not controlled transition performed under elder supervision. This was violent, uncontrolled, magnificent. Moonlight poured from her body as though the full moon itself had descended into her veins, as though she had swallowed starfire and now it was burning its way out. The radiance grew blinding, forcing the pack to shield their eyes, turning rain into streams of liquid mercury. Her brown robes shredded as her body expanded. Bones lengthened, muscles coiled with power she had never known existed. Her hands became massive paws tipped with claws that gleamed like polished steel. The shift should have taken minutes. It took 3 heartbeats. When it finished, Sera was gone. In her place stood a wolf that should not exist. She was enormous, larger than any Omega wolf, larger than most warriors, nearly the size of an alpha. Her fur shimmered pure silver white, each strand catching torchlight and reflecting it back 100 times brighter. Her eyes blazed with moonfire, not gold like normal wolves, but silver so intense it seemed to glow from within. Power radiated from her in waves that made ceremonial wolves whimper and cower. The very air around her crackled with energy that tasted like ozone and ancient magic. The clearing fell into shocked silence. Warriors stumbled backward. Omegas pressed against each other, torn between terror and awe. Even Elder Thorn stood frozen. "Impossible," he breathed. "No Omega possesses that kind of power." Sera's wolf turned massive head toward Kane. He had moved in front of Catherine instinctively, protective, but his face had gone pale with shock. His eyes, those ice-blue eyes that had dismissed her so easily, now widened with something that looked like fear and recognition, and understanding that came far too late. "Hartwell," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like prayer or curse. Her wolf did not answer in words, did not need to. The message was written in silver light and moonfire eyes and the undeniable truth that she had never been what they claimed she was. 3 warriors moved to intercept. Sera's wolf moved faster. Not attacking, defending. She swept them aside with precision, breaking no bones but sending clear message. She was not the helpless Omega they could torture at will. "Seize her!" Thorn shouted, but his voice held uncertainty now. A voice cut through the chaos. "Let her go!" Everyone turned. Reed Kavanaugh, elder warrior with 48 winters behind him, and more scars than most wolves collected in 3 lifetimes, stood at the edge of the formation with his shoulders squared despite the old injuries that made every movement cost him. "Stand down, warrior," Kane commanded. Reed met his alpha's gaze without flinching. "No, Alpha." Respectfully. "No." The 2 wolves stared at each other across space that held decades of shared battles and mutual respect. Kane's jaw tightened. His hands clenched, but he did not order others to subdue the elder warrior by force. Reed turned to Sera's wolf. "Run, little sister. That is not request. That is order from someone who served your mother and owes her memory this much." Sera's wolf hesitated for 1 heartbeat, meeting Reed's steady gaze and finding something there that felt like permission, like understanding, like the first real kindness anyone had offered in months. Then she ran. 3 bounds carried her across the clearing. Warriors dove from her path. Torches scattered. Someone screamed, but Sera was already gone, crashing through the tree line into forest beyond, her silver fur disappearing into shadow and moonlight. Behind her, the clearing erupted into chaos. Ahead of her, wilderness opened like promise. And inside her mind, her wolf sang with savage joy, even as her human heart shattered into pieces too small to ever fully mend. She ran through mountain forests for hours before exhaustion finally forced her to stop. Her wolf collapsed near a structure her nose identified as ancient stone and timber that had weathered countless seasons. She shifted back to human form as the moon reached its peak, naked and shivering and alone. She wept, not for Cain, not for the pack that had betrayed her, but for the version of herself who had believed obedience would keep her safe, who thought making herself small would earn acceptance, who trusted that patience would be rewarded with anything except more waiting. That Sera was dead now. The wolf had killed her during transformation. Good. She was still weeping when Reed appeared from the darkness hours later, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body remembered every battle it had survived. He carried supplies wrapped in oilcloth and a cloak that he draped over her shoulders without comment. "I did not come to drag you back," he said, settling onto a fallen log. "I came because your alpha made a choice that shames us all. And because I owe a debt to your mother that I can finally begin to repay." Sera pulled the cloak tighter and said nothing. Reed looked at her for a long moment. Then he spoke the words that would change everything. "I know what you are. I served with Sera Hartwell before the council ordered her death, before they tried to exterminate every Luna-touched bloodline in the territories." Sera's head snapped up. "My mother? Strongest wolf I ever knew," Reed confirmed. "Silver fur, moonfire eyes, just like yours. She led our border guard for 5 years before they killed her." The world tilted. "I was told she died in childbirth." Reed shook his head slowly. "Your mother died protecting you from execution order. She fought 30 warriors to buy you time to escape. I was ordered to participate. I refused, lost my position, lost everything except the knowledge that I had done right thing." "Why did they want us dead?" Reed pulled a bundle from his pack, old leather wrapped around something precious. "Because Luna-touched wolves are moon-blessed. You carry power that cannot be controlled through normal hierarchy. You can resist silver poisoning. You can lead without claiming dominance. You threaten everything the council has built their authority upon." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a journal, pages yellowed with age. "Your mother kept records, names of other Luna-touched wolves, locations, 23 names total, all marked dead except one." He showed her the final entry, written in handwriting she had never seen but somehow recognized. "Sera Hartwell, hidden among healers. Keep her invisible. Keep her safe. Let her survive what we could not." "Your mother's last words," Reed said. "She died so you could live. And now you have awakened. Now you have shown them what they feared. Now you have a choice." "What choice?" "Run and hide, or stand and build something worth your mother's sacrifice." Sera looked at the journal, at evidence of a bloodline that should not have been hunted, at names of wolves who died for the crime of being born different. She thought about Cain standing silent while they sentenced her to destruction, about Elder Thorn reading charges like scripture, about a pack that measured worth by submission rather than strength. Then she thought about her mother fighting 30 warriors alone, about Reed refusing orders and accepting consequences, about the possibility that somewhere other Luna-touched wolves might be hiding, waiting for someone to tell them hiding was no longer necessary. "What do I do?" she asked. Reed smiled. "First, you heal. Then, you learn. Then you build. And when you are ready, you teach other wolves that there is a different way to live. A way that does not require kneeling in mud, while those who should protect you turn away." The moon hung full and bright above them, bearing witness to a moment that would change everything. Sera felt her wolf stir, no longer buried, no longer silent, no longer willing to accept a world that demanded her submission as the price of existence. She looked at Reed and spoke the words that would begin a revolution. "Teach me." The first lesson Reed Kavanaugh taught Sera Hartwell in the wilderness was not about strength or dominance or the mechanics of transformation. It was about failure. "You will make mistakes," he said on that first morning while they stood in the ruins of what had once been a sacred grove, stone pillars scarred by fire from wars neither of them had fought. "Wolves will suffer because of your decisions. That is the weight of leadership. The question is not whether you can avoid failure. The question is whether you can carry the fallen and still keep moving forward. Sera looked at him across the space between them. This wolf who had sacrificed position and respect to refuse an immoral order, who carried old wounds from battles that had marked him permanently. How do you carry them? Reed's expression held the weariness of someone who had been asking himself that same question for decades. You give them purpose. You make their sacrifice mean something by building something worth dying for. The words settled into Sera's chest like stones, heavy and permanent. She thought about her mother fighting 30 warriors alone to buy time for a daughter who would spend the next 22 years hiding what she was. About Mira risking punishment to warn her about alliance negotiations. About Reed standing before his alpha and refusing orders despite knowing the cost. What are we building here? She asked. Reed surveyed the ruined grove, the broken stones and scorched earth, the evidence of sanctuary destroyed when wars moved elsewhere. Something different. Something that does not measure worth by bloodline or submission. A place where wolves choose their own path instead of having paths chosen for them. That sounds like revolution. He smiled, and it was grim and knowing. That is exactly what it is. The sanctuary occupied 12 acres of wilderness territory 30 miles northeast of Steelcrest lands, positioned where 3 unmarked borders converged, and pack authority weakened into lawless territory. The sacred grove at its center consisted of 4 ancient stone pillars arranged in defensive pattern, raised by ancestors who understood that wolves needed places of power as much as they needed hunting grounds. The pillars still hummed with old magic, faint but present, a reminder that not all strength came from fangs and claws. Water flowed from an underground spring that fed into a natural pool, the source blessed by moon priestesses generations past. The land itself provided advantages, ridges and ravines that channeled movement, dense forest that concealed those who knew how to move silently. It was, Reed explained during their first survey of the territory, a sacred place abandoned when the old ways fell out of favor, perfect for wolves who no longer fit into the new order. They did not have numbers. They had Sera, Reed, and the growing certainty that staying hidden meant accepting the world as it was rather than fighting for what it could become. That changed within the first week. Mira Reyes arrived on the 4th night, materializing from the darkness with exhaustion in every line of her body. She had walked 30 miles through wilderness, carrying what supplies she could steal from the healing house, driven by the knowledge that remaining at Steelcrest made her complicit in what they had done to Sera. I could not stay there, Mira said simply when Sera found her collapse near the spring. Not after watching what they did to you. Not after understanding that obedience to that system makes me part of its cruelty. She was 20 winters old and looked younger, small and fierce with dark eyes that had witnessed too much suffering. Sera wanted to send her back, to protect her from the consequences of association with an exile, but Reed intervened with the kind of wisdom that came from experience rather than optimism. She made her choice, he told Sera quietly while Mira rested. Respect it. Give her purpose. That is how you honor her courage. So Mira became the 2nd member of their small pack, and her presence transformed possibility into momentum. Others followed. 2 beta males named Marcus Webb and James Okonkwo arrived together, both cast out from Steelcrest for refusing to participate in what they called unjust punishment of an innocent wolf. They were experienced fighters with years of border patrol and territorial defense behind them. They looked at Sera with careful assessment, at her silver eyes and the power that radiated from her even in human form, and made the same calculation Reed had made. This wolf was worth following. 3 Omegas fled from Northern Coalition territory, bearing scars and stories of abuse that made Sera's stomach turn. They were wary and traumatized, and desperately hopeful that the sanctuary might offer safety their own packs had denied. Sera took them in without hesitation, gave them space to heal, asked nothing except honesty and willingness to defend those who could not defend themselves. Within 3 weeks of her escape from Steelcrest, Sera found herself leading a community of 11 wolves who had chosen freedom over hierarchy, dignity over submission, revolution over acceptance. Reed established the training with the precision of someone who understood that survival required more than good intentions. They woke with the dawn, trained their bodies and their wolves, learned to work together despite coming from different packs with different traditions. But the training Reed offered was not about physical prowess. It was about understanding the old magic that most modern packs had forgotten. "You are Luna touched," he explained during their first lesson in the sacred grove. "That means you carry moon blessing in your blood. But blessing without knowledge is wasted potential. Your mother knew this. She taught me some of what the ancient ones understood about pack bonds and moon magic." He showed Sera how to sense the threads that connected pack members, invisible lines of energy that allowed wolves to communicate across distance without words. How to strengthen those bonds through ritual and intent. How to draw power from the full moon and store it for times when lunar blessing was weakest. "Most packs have forgotten this," Reed said. "They rely on dominance, hierarchy, and physical strength. But the old packs, the ones who built places like this grove, they understood that true power came from connection. From wolves who chose to link their strength together rather than fighting for position." The training began simply. Reed had Sera sit in the center of the sacred grove while the 4 stone pillars hummed with ancient power around her. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Feel the earth beneath you. Feel the moon above you, even in daylight. Feel the threads that connect you to every wolf who has chosen to stand with you." At first, Sera felt nothing except the cold stone beneath her and the wind on her face. But Reed was patient, guiding her through breathing patterns that matched lunar cycles, teaching her to quiet her mind until she could sense what lay beneath surface awareness. Then, gradually, she began to feel them. Delicate threads of energy stretching from her chest to each member of her pack. Some were strong and bright, connections forged through trust and shared purpose. Others were fainter, newer bonds still forming. Each thread carried its own signature, its own flavor of emotion and intent. Mira's bond felt warm and steady, colored with fierce loyalty and healing energy. Marcus and James carried threads that pulsed with warrior strength and protective instinct. The Omega refugees contributed softer energies, gratitude and hope, and the tentative belief that safety might actually be possible. "Now," Reed said, watching her face as understanding dawned, "send something through the bonds, not words, emotion, intent. Let them feel what you feel." Sera focused on the warmth in her chest, the gratitude she felt for wolves who had chosen to follow her despite knowing the risks. She pushed that feeling outward, down the threads, imagining it flowing like light through darkness. Around the sanctuary, wolves stopped what they were doing and looked up. Mira gasped softly in the healing area. Marcus smiled despite himself on the eastern ridge. The Omegas gathered near the spring, felt tears prick their eyes without understanding why. They all felt Sera's gratitude washing over them through bonds they had not known existed. "Good," Reed said with satisfaction. "Now pull. Draw on their strength when you need it. That is the true power of Luna-touched wolves. You do not command. You connect. You do not dominate. You amplify what already exists." The lessons continued over the following weeks. Sera learned to strengthen individual bonds through ritual and intention, discovered how to create temporary connections for specific purposes, practiced drawing power from the full moon and storing it within the pack network for later use. Reed taught her the old words, phrases in a language that predated modern pack structure, syllables that resonated with moon magic and earth power. When spoken correctly during the full moon, these words could heal wounds that normal methods could not touch, could provide clarity when confusion threatened, could bind wolves together with connections stronger than blood. "Your mother knew all of this," Reed said during one particularly intense training session. She was trying to teach it to the pack, to help them remember what had been lost. But the council feared wolves who could bond without requiring hierarchy, feared packs that chose connection over dominance. So they killed her before she could spread the knowledge further. "How many others knew what she knew?" Sera asked. Reed's expression grew dark. 23 Luna-touched wolves across the territories, all of them carriers of the old knowledge. All of them murdered during the purge except the 7 council imprisoned and you. The knowledge your mother tried to preserve died with them." "Then I need to learn everything you remember," Sera said with determination. "Every word, every ritual, every technique. Because if I am the last one who can carry this forward, I will not let it die with me." They worked until exhaustion claimed them, until Sera could maintain pack bonds even in sleep, until she could sense distress from any pack member across miles of distance, until the moon magic felt as natural as breathing. And slowly, Sera began to understand what her mother had been building before Council destroyed her. Not just a pack, a network. A web of connections that could span territories, that could link Luna-touched wolves across vast distances, that could create something entirely new in wolf society. Something that did not require submission or dominance or violence to maintain. Something built on choice and connection, and the revolutionary idea that wolves were stronger together when they chose to be, rather than when they were forced. One night, roughly 4 weeks into her training, Sera achieved something Reed had not thought possible. During the full moon, with all her pack gathered in the sacred grove, she managed to create a temporary bond network that linked every wolf present into single consciousness. For 10 heartbeats, they all experienced what it meant to be truly pack. Not hierarchy, not submission, but genuine unity, every wolf contributing their unique strength to the whole. Every individual valued for what they brought, rather than ranked by what they could take. When the connection faded, several wolves were weeping. Mira looked at Sera with awe. Marcus and James stood side by side with expressions of wonder. Even Reed seemed shaken by what he had witnessed. "That is what your mother died trying to create," he said quietly. "That is the future Council fears. Because once wolves experience true pack bond, once they understand what is possible, they will never accept dominance hierarchy again." Sera looked at her pack, at wolves who had chosen freedom over safety, at the beginning of something that could reshape their entire world. "Then we build it," she said. "We create that future, and we make certain every Luna-touched wolf who still lives gets the chance to experience what we just felt." The pack bonds grew stronger with each passing day. Wolves began anticipating each other's needs without speaking. Patrols coordinated with unnatural precision. Even in human form, they moved like a single organism, each part aware of the whole. And Sera, at the center of it all, grew into her role as conduit and amplifier, learning to channel power she had never imagined, preparing for the moment when those skills would be tested against impossible odds. The nightmares came regularly. Sera would wake gasping in the darkness, her body still feeling the phantom impact of the lash that never landed, her ears still hearing Cain's voice saying he felt nothing. Reed taught her techniques from the old healing traditions, breathing exercises that used moon rhythms, grounding methods that connected her to the earth beneath her feet. "You were wounded," he told her after one particularly bad night when she had startled awake screaming. "Not physically, but spiritually. Public humiliation is a kind of torture. Betrayal by someone you trusted cuts deeper than claws. Your spirit is trying to heal. Let it. Do not fight the memories. Acknowledge them, learn from them, and then choose to move forward anyway." "How do you do that?" she asked. "By remembering you survived. By building something that makes the survival matter. By proving every day that they were wrong about you." The defensive capabilities of the sanctuary improved steadily. Marcus and James established patrol routes that provided early warning of any approach. Mira organized healing supplies, transforming one of the ancient stone structures into a functional treatment area stocked with herbs and knowledge. The Omega refugees contributed skills in tracking and wilderness survival, teaching the others which plants were safe to eat and which streams ran pure. Sera found herself settling into leadership not because she claimed authority, but because wolves looked to her for decisions and she learned to make them. Small things at first. Who would take which watch rotation? How to divide food when hunting was scarce? How to resolve conflicts when personalities clashed? But gradually the decisions grew larger. When 2 of the Omegas wanted to return to their former pack to retrieve family members, Sera had to weigh the risks of exposure against the moral imperative of offering refuge to those who needed it. She approved the mission, but insisted on careful planning, established signals for danger, set clear timelines for return. Both Omegas returned successfully with 3 additional refugees, and Sera learned that good leadership was not about avoiding risk, but about calculating acceptable risk and preparing for consequences. When Marcus proposed aggressive scouting into neutral territories to gather intelligence on pack movements, Sera had to balance the value of information against the danger of provoking retaliation. She compromised, approving careful observation, but establishing strict rules about engagement and retreat. The scouts provided valuable knowledge about Northern Coalition supply movements and revealed that Steelcrest was reinforcing border positions, suggesting they expected conflict. Reed watched her grow into the role with approval that he expressed sparingly but meaningfully. "You are becoming what your mother was, not a copy, your own version, but the same core. Someone wolves choose to follow because you give them something worth fighting for." The words meant more than any formal recognition could have. Sera was building something new, and every day it felt a little more real, a little more permanent, a little more like the future instead of desperate survival. Then Catherine Voss appeared at their border on a cold morning, 6 weeks after the ceremony. Alone and carrying intelligence that would change everything. The watch called alert just after dawn. Single wolf approaching from southwest, moving slowly, hands visible, no weapons. Sera was in the sacred grove practicing bond work when Marcus appeared with controlled urgency. "We have contact. Female, mid-30s, claims to be the healer from Eastern clans, the one who took your place at ceremony." Sera's wolf surged forward with instant aggression, remembering this female standing beside Cain during the ceremony, her hand in his while Sera knelt in the mud. Every instinct screamed to turn her away, to refuse audience to someone who represented everything that had destroyed her. But Reed's training held firm. Gather information before making decisions. Understand the situation before choosing action. "Bring her to the border," Sera said. "Under watch. I will meet her there." Catherine Voss looked different than she had during the ceremony. No formal attire, no ceremonial presentation. She wore travel-stained leathers and carried only a small pack. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like fear, though she maintained composure as she stood before the sanctuary entrance with 2 guards flanking her. Sera approached in human form but made no effort to hide the silver in her eyes or the power that radiated from her presence. Catherine's reaction was immediate and visceral, her wolf recognizing dominant force and responding with instinctive wariness. "Healer Voss," Sera said, her voice neutral. "You are far from Eastern territory." "I am here under peace banner," Catherine replied. "I have information you need. Information about Steelcrest, about the council, about why they orchestrated the ceremony the way they did." "You were part of that ceremony," Sera said coldly. "You took the bond that was not yours." Catherine flinched but held her ground. "I had no choice. My father is dying of silver poisoning. Elder Thorn promised access to Luna-touched healing magic as cure. He said it was the only way to save him. I believed him. And now? Now I know he lied. There is no cure using Luna-touched power alone. The entire alliance was fabricated to achieve different purpose. They needed Eastern wolves on Steelcrest territory to guard something they were hiding from their own pack. Guard what? Catherine reached slowly for her pack, moving carefully under the watchful eyes of guards. "May I show you?" Sera nodded permission. The documents Catherine produced were records written in the old script, preserved on treated hide that had survived years of storage. They detailed a conspiracy far larger than Sera had imagined. Elder Council had not been content with genocide of Luna-touched bloodline 22 years ago. They had captured 7 survivors and imprisoned them in chambers beneath Steelcrest territory. The prisoners were being used as sources for experiments attempting to harvest Luna-touched power without the inconvenient free will that came with it. The council wanted to create a way to channel moon magic through willing subordinates, to claim the strength of Luna-touched blessing without accepting wolves who could not be controlled through normal hierarchy. Every attempt had failed. Luna-touched power came from connection and choice, not domination and force. You could not separate the magic from the consciousness that wielded it. But the council kept trying, kept prisoners in silver-lined cells that weakened them, kept experimenting with rituals and blood magic and methods that bordered on torture. Catherine showed Sera images captured through memory stones, magical devices that preserved what the user witnessed. The faces in those cells were gaunt and scarred, bearing evidence of long captivity and repeated procedures. Sera recognized one face from Reed's descriptions and her mother's journal. Thomas Hartwell, her father, alive and imprisoned and suffering while she had spent years believing he died before she was born. Rage swept through her so powerfully that silver light flickered across her skin, her wolf pressing against control with murderous intent. Catherine stepped back reflexively, hands raised in placating gesture. "I am sorry," the healer said quietly. "I did not know the full scope until 4 weeks ago. When I discovered the truth, I began documenting everything. Then I left, abandoned the alliance. My father will die now without the cure I cannot provide, but at least I will not be complicit in this. Why bring this to me? Sera asked through teeth clenched against transformation. Why not expose it yourself? Because I am one wolf against two packs and a council with decades of practice covering their crimes. But you? Catherine met her eyes steadily. You are Luna touched. You are the thing they fear most. And if the legends are accurate, you may be strong enough to stop them. Sera looked at the memory stone images again, at the prisoners who shared her bloodline, at evidence of systematic cruelty masquerading as research. She thought about her mother dying to protect her from exactly this fate, about Reed refusing orders and accepting punishment, about every wolf at the sanctuary who had chosen dignity over safety. What do you want in return for this intelligence? Catherine's laugh was bitter. I want to sleep at night knowing I tried to fix what I helped break. I want my father to die with some measure of honor left in our family name. And if you manage to destroy Elder Council in the process, I want to watch. Sera studied the healer for a long moment, weighing sincerity against potential deception. Finally, she nodded. You can stay, temporarily, under watch. If your information proves accurate, we will discuss more permanent arrangements. Relief flooded Catherine's expression. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Sera said. If you are lying, if this is trap, I will let my pack decide your fate. And they have little mercy for those who side with our enemies. The council convened in the sacred grove within the hour. Sera spread the memory stone images across a flat stone while her pack assembled. Reed, Marcus, James, Mira, and 3 senior members of the community who had earned their places through contribution and commitment. Catherine stood under guard at the perimeter, present to answer questions but not invited to participate. Sera laid out the intelligence systematically. The prisoner locations, the guard rotations, the chamber access points, the evidence of council conspiracy. When she finished, silence hung heavy in the grove. Reed spoke first. This changes everything. Northern Coalition is not preparing for territorial conquest. They are mobilizing to rescue their people. They know Council has been kidnapping Luna-touched wolves from multiple territories. Which means, Marcus added, we have 3 forces converging. Steelcrest defending prisoners they want to keep hidden. Northern Coalition attacking to rescue their stolen pack members. And us in the middle with neither sufficient numbers nor alliances to influence the outcome. We cannot allow Council to continue holding Luna-touched wolves, Sera said. Those prisoners are my people, my family. I will not abandon them to torture and experimentation. James leaned forward. Rescue operation. Small team, using pack bonds for silent communication, in and out before anyone realizes what happened. Steelcrest has 60 warriors plus Eastern reinforcements, Reed countered. We have 14. Even with surprise and Luna-touched power, those numbers are prohibitive. Then we use Northern Coalition as distraction, Marcus suggested. Let them attack Steelcrest defenses while we infiltrate and extract prisoners. And when Northern Coalition realizes we took their objective? Sera asked. They turn on us next. We traded one enemy for another. The debate continued for hours. Plans proposed and dismantled. Options developed and discarded. Every scenario ended the same way. Insufficient wolves, impossible odds, unacceptable risk of failure. Finally, Reed spoke the truth they were all avoiding. This mission will cost lives, probably many lives. The question is whether the objective justifies the cost. Sera looked around the grove at wolves who had chosen to follow her, who had given up safety and pack affiliation because they believed the sanctuary represented something better. She thought about asking them to die for prisoners they had never met, about spending lives she had no right to spend. Then she thought about her mother fighting 30 warriors alone, about spending 22 years hiding what she was, because Council had decided her existence was threat, about 7 wolves suffering in darkness while she debated acceptable losses. We go, she said, and her voice carried absolute certainty. We extract the prisoners, and we make certain Council understands that Luna-touched wolves are not experiments to be conducted or weapons to be controlled. We are Pack, and Pack does not leave anyone behind. Reed smiled with fierce pride. When do we move? 3 days, Sera said. That gives us time to prepare properly, to strengthen pack bonds for the operation, to coordinate with the moon cycle. The next full moon rises in 72 hours. We use her blessing. The planning consumed the next 2 days. Sera gathered her most trusted wolves in the sacred grove, where the ancient stones amplified their connection and allowed for precise communication through pack bonds. "The objective is clear," she began, spreading Catherine's memory stone images across the flat altar stone. 7 Luna-touched prisoners held in chambers beneath Steel Crest territory. Intelligence indicates the chambers are lined with silver to weaken them, guarded by Eastern warriors who rotate in shifts of 4. Marcus studied the images with practiced eye. Access points? Catherine stepped forward, still under watch, but permitted to contribute knowledge. 3 entrances. Main access through the Great Hall, heavily guarded and monitored. Service entrance near the healing house, less secure but still patrolled. And an old shaft that was used for ventilation in ancient times, now sealed but still structurally sound. The ventilation shaft, Sera decided. Mira knows the healing house layout. She can guide us to the entrance. "What about Northern Coalition attack?" James asked. "The intelligence suggests they move within 3 days. We use their assault as distraction," Sera confirmed, "but we coordinate timing through pack bonds. I want to know the moment they engage Steel Crest defenders. We infiltrate during the chaos, extract prisoners before anyone realizes we are there." "And if we encounter Steel Crest wolves during extraction?" one of the Omegas asked quietly. Sera's jaw tightened. "We disable if necessary, but we do not kill unless there is no other choice. These wolves are following orders, not making them. Our enemy is Council, not the pack they have deceived." Reed leaned forward, his weathered face serious. "The real challenge is not infiltration. It is extraction. 7 prisoners weakened by silver poisoning, possibly unable to shift or move quickly. We need a strategy that accounts for carrying incapacitated wolves through hostile territory. That is where pack bonds become crucial," Sera said. "We will not rely on physical strength alone. I will establish temporary bonds with the prisoners the moment we reach them. Those bonds will allow me to share Luna-touched healing energy, to counteract silver poisoning temporarily, to give them strength to move." "Can you maintain that many connections while under stress?" Mira asked with healer's concern. "I have to," Sera replied simply. "If I cannot, we leave no one behind regardless. We carry them." The team composition took hours to finalize. Sera would lead the infiltration team with Mira, Marcus, and 2 of the beta wolves who had proven themselves during training. Reed would command the perimeter security, positioned to intercept any pursuit and provide fallback support. James would coordinate with Northern Coalition through indirect signals, ensuring their attack coincided with the rescue timing. They practiced the operation in the sanctuary, using the terrain to simulate the chambers beneath Steel Crest. Sera worked on establishing rapid bonds with volunteers who pretended to be weakened prisoners, learning to channel healing energy while maintaining awareness of her surroundings. Mira rehearsed emergency healing techniques that could stabilize critical injuries using only moon magic and herbs. Marcus drilled the team on silent movement and coordinated action, teaching them hand signals that would work even if pack bonds were disrupted by silver proximity. They practiced until every wolf could execute their role while exhausted, injured, or separated from the group. On the second night of preparation, Sera stood alone in the sacred grove as the nearly full moon rose above the pillars. She could feel the weight of what was coming, the probability that some of her wolves would not return, the terrible responsibility of leading others into danger. Reed found her there, settling beside her with the careful movements of someone whose body had collected too many scars. "You are thinking about the cost," he observed. "How do you lead knowing people might die following your orders?" she asked. "You remember why it matters," Reed said. "You remember that some things are worth dying for, and you make certain that if wolves fall, their sacrifice means something beyond the moment of their death." 7 prisoners have been suffering for years," Sera said quietly. "My father among them. If we do not act, they die in those chambers. They die without hope. They die believing no one cared enough to try. And if your wolves die trying to save them, then they die proving that pack means something. That connection matters more than safety, that some bonds are worth any price." Reed nodded slowly. "Your mother would say the same thing. She led wolves into battle knowing some would fall. But she gave them purpose. She gave them meaning. That is all any leader can offer." They sat in silence while the moon climbed higher. 2 wolves carrying the weight of command, preparing to ask others to risk everything for a cause that might fail. The night before the operation, Sera gathered her entire pack in the sacred grove for a ritual Reed had taught her. an old ceremony meant to strengthen bonds and provide blessing for dangerous undertaking. They stood in a circle around the altar stone, each wolf connected through visible threads of pack bond energy that glowed silver in the moonlight. Sera spoke the ancient words, her voice carrying power that made the stone pillars hum in resonance. Moon goddess who watches over all wolves, we ask your blessing on our endeavor. We seek to free those who suffer in darkness. We seek to prove that pack bonds matter more than power or position. We seek to build a world where all wolves can choose their own path. The pack responded in unison, their voices harmonizing through bond connection. We are pack, we do not abandon our own, no matter the cost. Silver light poured down from the full moon, bathing them all in radiance that felt like benediction. For one perfect moment, every wolf present felt the absolute certainty that what they were attempting was right, regardless of outcome. When the ritual ended, wolves embraced each other with the fierce intensity of those who knew this might be farewell. Mira held Sera tightly, whispering promises to protect her no matter what came. Marcus and James gripped forearms in the warrior's gesture of brotherhood. The Omegas clustered together, drawing strength from their shared determination to prove their worth through action rather than submission. Reed approached Sera last, his expression serious. Your mother would be insufferably proud of you. Probably making jokes about how you make revolution look easy. Nothing about this is easy, Sera replied. No, Reed agreed. But it is worth doing. That is what matters. Easy is for wolves who choose comfort over meaning. You chose the harder path. You chose to build something worth your mother's sacrifice. He handed her a small object wrapped in worn leather. Your mother's memory stone. She recorded her final message before the council came for her. I have carried it for 22 years, waiting for the right moment to pass it on. That moment is now. Sera unwrapped the stone with trembling hands. When she activated it, her mother's face appeared in the preserved memory, silver eyes blazing with life and determination. If you are seeing this, Liana's voice said, then you survived. You awakened. You discovered what you truly are. I am proud beyond words, little one. Not because you are Luna-touched, not because you carry power, but because you chose to stand when standing was dangerous. You chose to fight when hiding would be safer. You chose pack over self. The image shifted to show Liana standing in the sacred grove, the same pillars surrounding her that now stood witness to Sera's revolution. This place was built by our ancestors as sanctuary for those who did not fit into normal pack structure. Use it well. Build what I could not finish. And remember, true strength is not what you can take. It is what you choose to give. The memory faded, leaving Sera with tears streaming down her face and determination burning in her chest. She looked at Reed with gratitude beyond words. Thank you, she whispered. Make it count, he replied. Make her sacrifice mean something. As dawn approached, the sanctuary settled into the particular stillness that precedes action. Weapons were checked, though not the modern kind. Claws and teeth were all they needed. Supplies were packed. Bonds were strengthened one final time. And Sera stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of 14 lives that had been placed in her trust, carrying the legacy of a mother she barely remembered, preparing to prove that Luna-touched wolves were exactly what Council feared most, not weapons they could control, but leaders who chose mercy even when vengeance would be easier, healers who fought when healing required it, wolves who understood that true power came not from domination, but from connection freely chosen. The full moon would rise at sunset. Northern Coalition would attack shortly after, and Sera would lead her pack into the heart of enemy territory to prove that some bonds could not be broken by silver or fear or the machinery of institutional cruelty. While the sanctuary prepared for the most dangerous operation they had ever attempted, events at Steelcrest were deteriorating in ways none of them could have predicted. Kane Merrick stood in his private chambers reviewing scout reports that made less sense with each reading. Northern Coalition supply movements did not match invasion patterns. Troop positioning suggested defensive posture rather than offensive preparation. Word from border contacts revealed confusion about Steelcrest fortifications that should not exist if Coalition had been planning attack for months. Something was profoundly wrong with the original intelligence. He pulled records from secure storage, comparing current observations against the evidence Elder Thorne had presented during council. The inconsistencies were subtle but present. Scout reports with identical phrasing suggesting single author rather than multiple sources. Supply cache locations that made no tactical sense. Timeline discrepancies that only became apparent when examined carefully. The intelligence had been fabricated. Ice settled in Kane's chest as implications crystallized. The threat had been manufactured. The alliance had been unnecessary. He had sacrificed Sera for political theater, designed to import Eastern warriors for purposes that had nothing to do with defense. He went looking for Elder Thorn with fury barely contained, found the Elder in the council chambers reviewing documents with Elder Moira. The Northern Coalition intelligence was falsified, Kane said without preamble. You manufactured the threat. Thorn's expression remained carefully neutral. I do not know what you are suggesting, Alpha. Kane slammed the records onto the table between them. Do not insult me. I have spent decades analyzing threats. These reports are fabrications. You created a crisis to force the Eastern Alliance. Why? We did what was necessary to protect this pack, Thorn replied, his voice hardening. And you did what was necessary by accepting the alliance. What is the real reason you needed Eastern warriors here? Kane demanded. What are you hiding? Thorn stood, drawing himself to full height despite advanced years. You are relieved of command, Alpha Kane. Effective immediately. The Council has determined you are emotionally compromised, unstable, a danger to pack security. The words hung in the air. Kane looked at Moira, who would not meet his eyes, then back at Thorn, who stared him down with absolute certainty that institutional authority would prevail. You cannot do this, Kane said quietly. I can, and I have. You are obsessed with an Omega who attempted to manipulate you into unauthorized bond. You need treatment, confinement until your mind clears. Eastern wolves entered the chamber on cue, 6 of them, prepared for confrontation. The choreography was too smooth to be spontaneous. Thorn had been ready for this. Kane calculated in the space of a heartbeat. 6 against 1. Alert preventing pack support. No way to communicate warning. He could fight and die here, accomplishing nothing. Or he could submit and survive long enough to discover what Thorn was hiding. He submitted. Not because he accepted the judgment, but because 20 years of leadership had taught him that retreat was not surrender. They confined him in his own quarters under guard, stripped him of authority and access to pack bonds. Through the window, he watched Eastern warriors patrolling his territory, watched Council consolidating power, watched his pack accept the transition with the smooth obedience of wolves, accustomed to following orders without question. And he understood with bitter clarity that he had failed not just Sera, but everything he claimed to believe in. He had chosen institutional loyalty over individual truth. He had sacrificed the only wolf who had ever made his wolf calm for political alliance built on lies. He had become exactly what he claimed to oppose. Complicit. The escape came 3 nights later, executed with the kind of precision that only decades of partnership could produce. Reed Kavanaugh appeared outside Kane's window well after midnight, moving with remarkable stealth for a wolf carrying old injuries. He worked the lock mechanism with tools and knowledge, had the window open in under 2 minutes, gestured for silence as Kane climbed through. They moved through Steelcrest territory using paths Reed remembered from years of service, routes that avoided patrols and watchers, terrain that provided concealment. Neither spoke until they were 5 miles into neutral ground. You look like death, Reed observed. Kavanaugh, Kane managed. You disobeyed direct orders, again. Yes, Alpha, Reed said, just like you taught me. Never abandon pack. I am not pack anymore. Council stripped me of everything. Reed gave him a look that held decades of shared battles. You were never just Alpha. You were pack brother. And brothers do not let brothers rot in cages when there is work to be done. They walked in silence for another mile before Kane asked the question burning in his mind. Sera, is she alive? Alive and leading, Reed confirmed. Built herself a sanctuary. 14 wolves and growing. Learning the old magic. Planning operations that would make you proud if you were not busy drowning in regret. The words landed hard. I made a choice. The threat seemed real. The stakes seemed clear. The threat was manufactured, Reed said flatly. Thorn fabricated everything to force Eastern Alliance. You sacrificed Sera for a lie. I know, Kane admitted, and the words tasted like ash. I discovered the deception 3 days ago. That is why they imprisoned me. And I need to find her. Tell her the truth. Try to make amends for choices I cannot undo, but can at least acknowledge were profoundly wrong. Reed stopped walking, turned to face his former alpha. She does not want your apologies. She does not need them. What she needs is for you to prove you learned something, to show that the sacrifice she endured taught you the difference between following orders and doing what is right. How do I do that? Reed resumed walking, leading them northeast toward mountains that held the sanctuary. You start by listening when she tells you what she needs. You continue by following her lead instead of assuming command. You earn back what you destroyed by demonstrating you understand why it mattered in the first place. They walked through the night, two wolves who had fought together and failed together and were now attempting to build something better from the wreckage. As dawn broke over the mountains, the sanctuary appeared in the distance, stone pillars and determination and the promise of redemption that would take years to achieve. If she allowed it, Sera was strengthening pack bonds in the sacred grove when the alert came. Two wolves approaching from southwest, moving openly. Marcus provided identification. Reed and Alpha Merrick. The words hit like claws. Sera's first instinct was to order them turned away, to refuse audience to the Alpha who had destroyed her trust. But Reed had been right about everything else. Perhaps he was right about this too. Bring them to the border, she ordered, under watch. Kane Merrick looked different than she remembered. Thinner, harder, carrying exhaustion that went deeper than physical fatigue. When their eyes met across the sanctuary entrance, she saw recognition and regret, and something that might have been grief. She felt nothing except the hollow space where love used to live. Alpha Merrick, she said, her voice neutral, you are far from Steelcrest. I know what Thorn did, he said without preamble. The intelligence was fabricated, the threat was manufactured. I was wrong to believe it, wrong to choose alliance over bond, wrong to stand silent while they tortured you. The apology was accurate but inadequate. Sera studied him for a long moment, remembering secret meetings and whispered promises and the version of him that had treated her like an equal. You discovered the truth, she said. How long ago? 5 days. And you are here now because council imprisoned you when you confronted them with evidence. His jaw tightened. Yes. So you come to me, not because you realized you were wrong, but because you have nowhere else to go. You want absolution because your pack rejected you, not because you genuinely understand what you destroyed. Hartwell, he started. I am not Hartwell anymore, she said, and her voice carried steel beneath silk. I am not your healer or your subordinate or the Omega who waited for permission to exist. I am Luna Touched Wolf building something that does not require your approval. Then why are you talking to me instead of turning me away? Because I need every capable wolf for an operation launching in 3 days, she said bluntly. And because Reed vouches for you despite your failures. But understand this clearly. You are not in command here. You do not give orders. You follow mine. You prove through actions that you learned something from destroying what we could have built. Maybe in years to come, we reassess. But today, you are just another wolf seeking sanctuary, nothing more. Kane absorbed the words, the demotion from alpha to supplicant, the stripping of status and the respect he had spent decades earning. Sera watched him process, watched him calculate, watched him make the choice that would determine everything that followed. Yes, he said quietly, I understand, I will follow your lead. Good, Sera replied. Then welcome to our sanctuary. We gather at sunset to finalize plans for prisoner rescue. Try to keep up. She turned and walked away, leaving him standing at the border with Reed, leaving him to understand that forgiveness was not given freely, but earned through sustained service. Behind her she heard Reed's quiet voice. Told you she was leading. And Kane's reply, barely audible. She always was. I was just too blind to see it. Sera did not look back. There was no time for reconciliation or sentiment or anything except the mission ahead. 7 Luna-touched wolves were suffering in Steelcrest chambers. Northern Coalition was mobilizing for attack. Elder Council was consolidating power built on lies and cruelty. The time for hiding was over. The time for patience had ended. Now came the hard part. The fighting, the bleeding, the proving that Luna-touched wolves were not experiments or threats or casualties to be managed. They were Pack, and Pack did not abandon their own, no matter the cost. The night before the rescue, the sanctuary fell into the particular kind of silence that precedes battle. Not peaceful quiet, but suspended breath. The stillness of wolves checking their resolve for the 100th time, reviewing plans until they could execute them blind, and making peace with mortality in whatever ways warriors found when when dawn promised blood. Sera stood watch in the eastern edge of the sacred grove, her enhanced vision tracking shadows in the forest below, her mind cycling through contingencies and failure points and the terrible arithmetic of acceptable losses. 14 wolves under her guidance, 7 prisoners to extract, unknown casualties to endure. The numbers refused to balance no matter how she calculated them. Footsteps announced company before scent confirmed identity. Reed approached slowly, settling beside her with the careful movements of a wolf whose body remembered every battle it had survived. "Cannot sleep either," he observed. "Too many things that could go wrong," Sera admitted. "They always do," Reed said. "That is the nature of dangerous work. You plan for perfection and execute through chaos. The measure of leadership is not preventing failure. It is adapting when failure inevitably arrives." They sat in companionable silence while the moon tracked across the sky, 2 wolves keeping vigil before battle, bound by purpose and the understanding that tomorrow, some of them might not return. "Tell me about the worst day," Sera said quietly. Reed was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he began speaking, his voice carrying the weight of memories that decades had not lightened. 23 years ago, the night council came for your mother. We knew they were coming. Had 3 days' warning. Liana could have run, could have disappeared into rogue territories and survived. But she had you to protect, so she stayed. She fought. And when they finally overwhelmed her, she made sure her last act was giving you enough time to escape. He paused, staring at something only he could see. I watched her fall, watched 30 warriors bring down the strongest wolf I ever knew. I carry that failure every day. The knowledge that I was not strong enough to stand with her when it mattered most. You saved me instead, Sera said. That was her choice, her gift to you. Does not make it lighter to carry, Reed replied. But I try every day to build something that makes her sacrifice mean more than tragedy. He turned to look at her, his weathered face illuminated by moonlight. Tomorrow you will make decisions under pressure. People may suffer because of choices you make in split seconds with incomplete information. That is the burden of command. The question is whether you have the strength to carry the fallen and keep moving forward. Sera met his eyes. I do not know if I am strong enough. Your mother was, Reed said, and you are her daughter, not a copy, your own version, but the same steel. You will do what needs doing, and when it is over, you will grieve, and then you will rebuild. Because that is what Luna-touched wolves do. Below them, wolves had gathered around a fire in the clearing, sharing stories, bearing witness to each other, ensuring that if they fell tomorrow, someone would remember they had existed beyond the moment of their death. Come on, Reed said, levering himself upright. Your pack needs to see you. Not the leader reviewing plans, the wolf who stands with them in the dark. They descended to join the circle. The stories flowed like water, each wolf offering pieces of themselves, building connection that would sustain them through what was coming. When the fire burned low and dawn approached, Sera gathered her pack for final preparations. The full moon rises at sunset, she said. Northern Coalition attacks shortly after. We infiltrate during the chaos, extract prisoners, withdraw before anyone realizes we were there. Remember, we do not kill unless there is no other choice. Our enemy is council, not the wolves they have deceived. She assigned each wolf their role with careful consideration. Mira would guide them through the healing house to the ventilation shaft. Marcus and James would provide security during extraction. Reed would command perimeter defense. Cain would handle any Steelcrest wolves they encountered, using his knowledge and authority to buy time. Questions, she asked. Cain raised his hand. In all my years leading Steelcrest, I never understood what true leadership meant. I thought it was about making hard choices and accepting consequences. But watching you prepare for this operation, I realize leadership is about giving wolves something worth dying for. You have given us that. Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for teaching me what I should have known all along. It was not forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. Sera nodded once and moved on. Final bond strengthening at midday, she said. Rest until then, gather your strength. And remember, we are pack. We do not abandon our own. The day passed in slow tension. Wolves rested, checked equipment, strengthened bonds through quiet ritual. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Sera gathered everyone in the sacred grove for the moon calling. They stood in a circle around the altar stone, pack bonds glowing silver in the fading light. Sera spoke the ancient words Reed had taught her, her voice resonating with power that made the stone pillars hum. Moon goddess who watches over all wolves, we ask your blessing on our endeavor. We seek to free those who suffer in darkness. We seek to prove that pack bonds matter more than power. We seek justice for those who cannot seek it themselves. The pack responded as one. We are pack. We do not abandon our own, no matter the cost. As the full moon rose, silver light poured down like liquid benediction, bathing them all in radiance that felt like the goddess herself reaching down to touch them. Power flooded through pack bonds, amplified by Sera's Luna-touched nature, strengthening every wolf beyond their normal capacity. For one perfect moment, they were invincible, united, unstoppable. Then the moment passed, and they were just wolves again. But wolves who had felt what was possible, wolves who knew they carried something worth fighting for. It is time, Sera said. They moved. The journey to Steel Crest took 3 hours, traveling in wolf form through wilderness terrain. Sera led, her silver fur gleaming in moonlight, pack bonds allowing her to coordinate movement without sound. Behind her, 13 wolves followed with absolute precision, each trusting the connections that linked them into single purpose. They reached the perimeter just as Northern Coalition launched their assault. The clash of 200 wolves hitting Steelcrest's defensive line shook the earth. Howls split the night, primal and terrible. The sound of combat filled the air with snarls and yelps, and the particular wet sounds of fangs finding flesh. Bodies collided, claws tore, blood darkened the ground. It was exactly the distraction they needed. Sera led her team toward the healing house while chaos consumed the northern border. Through pack bonds, she could sense the battle's rhythm, could feel warriors falling on both sides, could track Northern Coalition's advance as they pushed deeper into Steelcrest territory. Mira guided them to the old ventilation shaft with practiced precision. The entrance was sealed with stone that had weathered countless seasons, but Marcus and James worked together, their combined strength leveraging rocks aside until the opening gaped like a wound in the earth. The shaft descended into absolute darkness. Sera shifted to human form, needing hands for the climb down. One by one, they dropped into the maintenance corridors below, landing on ancient stone that had not felt wolf paws in generations. The air below smelled of damp earth and something else: fear, suffering. The particular scent of wolves kept in captivity too long. Through pack bonds, Sera felt the positions of every team member, felt Reed establishing defensive perimeter at the planned extraction point, felt Kane's controlled tension as he moved with them, every muscle ready to intervene if needed, felt Mira's healer instincts cataloging potential injuries and preparation requirements. The corridors branched like veins through stone. Mira led them deeper, following mental maps she had constructed from Catherine's intelligence. Left turn, 30 paces, right turn, down another level. The path was labyrinthine, designed to confuse intruders. But Mira had studied well. She brought them exactly where they needed to be. The prisoner wing announced itself through multiple senses. The scent intensified, becoming almost overwhelming. Suffering and sickness, and the particular acrid smell of silver poisoning that made Sera's wolf recoil instinctively. The stone itself seemed darker here, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. And then Sera saw the guards. 4 Eastern warriors stood watch at the chamber entrance, professional and alert despite the chaos raging above. They were positioned perfectly, covering all approaches, weapons ready. Not the modern kind. These warriors carried traditional blades blessed under dark moons, designed to wound wolves in ways that normal combat could not. Sera sent a thought through pack bonds, clear and precise. Marcus, James, left and right. I take center. Mira, cover rear. Kane reserve, on my mark. On my... She gathered moon blessing, feeling the full moon's power flowing through her, Luna-touched nature. Silver light began to glow beneath her skin, soft at first, then building to intensity that made the shadows flee. Now, Marcus and James exploded into motion from opposite sides, their wolf forms silent as death. They struck with precision learned through weeks of training together, their movements perfectly synchronized through pack bonds. Claws found pressure points. Fangs closed on throats without crushing windpipes. Within 3 heartbeats, 2 guards were unconscious and secured. The remaining 2 guards turned, raising alarm, but Sera was already moving. She channeled moon power through her body, feeling it enhance speed and strength beyond normal capacity. She crossed the distance in a blur of silver light, struck one guard with force that sent him crashing into stone wall. He slumped, unconscious before he hit ground. The fourth guard managed to draw his blessed blade, swinging toward Cain, who had moved to intercept. But Cain's decades of combat experience served him well. He shifted mid-stride, his wolf form larger and more powerful than the guard expected. He caught the blade in his jaws, twisted, disarmed the warrior, and brought him down with controlled force that rendered him unconscious without permanent harm. All four guards neutralized, no kills, no alarms raised, perfect execution. Through pack bonds, Sera felt her team's satisfaction, felt the mission's success probability increasing, felt hope beginning to build. The chambers were sealed with doors, reinforced with silver, designed to keep Luna-touched wolves contained even at full strength. But Mira had prepared for this. She pulled blessed tools from her pack, implements that had been bathed in sacred spring water under full moon, blessed with ancient words that Reed had taught them. Silver could not hold against moon magic when wielded correctly. Mira worked each lock with steady hands, speaking the old words in whispers that resonated with power. The silver began to glow, then fade, its binding strength dissolving before concentrated moon blessing. The locks opened with soft clicks that sounded like freedom. 1 cell, 2, 3. Mira worked methodically while Marcus and James stood guard, and Sera prepared herself for what she would find. 7 cells, 7 prisoners, 7 Luna-touched wolves who had been suffering while the world forgot them. Sera stepped into the first cell. The elderly female inside looked up with eyes that blazed defiance, despite obvious starvation. Her name, Sera would learn later, was Sera Windcaller. She had been imprisoned for 9 years. The second cell held Marcus Silver, covered in burns from prolonged exposure to silver instruments. 6 years of captivity. Cells 3 through 6 contained wolves in various states of trauma, some conscious and aware, others barely clinging to life, all bearing evidence of systematic torture masked as research. Then Sera reached cell 7. Thomas Hartwell sat against the far wall, silver chains around his wrists and ankles, his body bearing scars from experiments that had gone on for 22 years. 22 years of imprisonment, while Sera had lived in hiding, never knowing her father survived. Their eyes met across the cell, silver to silver. Luna touched, recognizing Luna touched. Father and daughter reunited through circumstances that should never have existed. Sera felt something break inside her chest. Not her strength, not her resolve, but the wall she had built around her grief for parents she had never known. Tears streamed down her face as she crossed the cell and knelt beside him. "I am Sera," she whispered. "Liana's daughter, your daughter." Thomas raised one shaking hand to touch her face, his fingers gentle despite the chains. "You look like her," he said. "Same fire in your eyes, same strength in your jaw. She would be so proud." "We need to move," Sera managed through tears. "I will get you out of here, all of you." She stood and moved to the center of the chamber where all 7 cells connected. Closed her eyes, reached for the full moon that blazed above ground, calling its power through stone and earth and the ancient magic that Luna-touched wolves carried in their blood. The pack bond she had with her team glowed brighter. Then she began creating new bonds, thin threads of silver energy reaching toward each prisoner. It was harder than anything she had attempted before. The prisoners were weakened, their wolves suppressed by prolonged silver exposure, their spirits damaged by years of torture. But Sera was Luna-touched, conduit and amplifier, bridge between wolves. She pulled power from the full moon, from her pack, from the sacred grove miles away that resonated with ancient magic. She wove bonds of silver light around each prisoner, connecting them to her, connecting them to pack network, giving them strength drawn from sources beyond their individual capacity. Then she began to channel healing. Moon-blessed energy poured through the bonds like water through dry riverbeds. It flowed from Sera into the prisoners, washing through their systems, counteracting silver poisoning, giving them strength they had not felt in years. It did not heal their injuries completely. The damage was too severe, too long-standing. But it gave them enough to stand, enough to walk, enough to survive extraction. The cost was immediate and catastrophic. Sera felt her own strength draining like blood from open wound. Her vision blurred, her legs trembled. Her wolf whimpered with exhaustion as power flowed out of her faster than she could replenish it. She was giving too much, channeling more than her body could sustain. Through pack bonds, she felt her team's alarm. Felt Kane move closer, ready to catch her if she fell. Felt Mira's healer instinct screaming warnings. Felt Reed's distant concern from the perimeter. "I am fine," she sent, though it was a lie her pack could sense through bonds. But she held the connection stable, refused to let them collapse until every prisoner could stand. Because abandoning anyone was not an option. Because pack did not leave wolves behind. Because her mother had not died, so Sera could half-finish rescues. When the last prisoner rose to their feet, when Thomas stood despite chains that had held him for 2 decades, when Sera Windcaller smiled with tears streaming down her weathered face, Sera finally released the bonds. She collapsed. Strong hands caught her before she hit stone, Kane's voice in her ear. "I have you. Rest. We will get them out." Sera wanted to argue, wanted to stay conscious and lead. But her body had reached its limit. The world faded to gray, then black, and consciousness slipped away. She woke moments later, her team carrying her. Through blurred vision, she saw prisoners walking, supported by pack members. Saw Mira guiding them through corridors. Saw Marcus and James providing security. The extraction became what it needed to be. Controlled movement through hostile territory, every wolf supporting the mission however they could. And then they reached the corridor where Elder Thorn waited. They were halfway to the ventilation shaft when everything went wrong. Elder Thorn appeared in the corridor ahead with 6 steel crest warriors, blocking their path. His expression was cold calculation as he assessed the situation. "Luna touched abomination," he said, looking at Sera with contempt that had been perfected over decades. "You should have stayed in exile. Now you die here with your failed rescue." "Stand aside," Sera commanded, and her voice carried power amplified by full moon blessing. "Your crimes are known. Your conspiracy is exposed. Move or be moved." Thorn laughed. "You are weakened from healing them. You can barely stand. What will you do, little Omega? Fight 6 warriors while protecting prisoners who can barely walk?" Sera felt her pack bonds pulse with readiness. Felt Marcus and James preparing to engage. Felt Mira moving prisoners behind defensive position. Felt Kane stepping forward. "Elder Thorn," Kane said quietly, and his voice carried authority that 20 years of leadership had built. "Stand down. This ends now." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "You are no longer Alpha. Council stripped you of authority." "You stripped me of title," Kane agreed. "But you cannot strip me of what I learned, of who I choose to follow, and I choose her." He moved to stand beside Sera, his presence solid and unwavering. One by one, the Steel Crest warriors behind Thorn hesitated, recognizing their former Alpha, uncertain who to obey. "She led you into dishonor," Thorn hissed. "She corrupted you with false bonds and Omega manipulation." "She taught me the difference between following orders and doing what is right," Kane replied. "She showed me that true strength is not what you take but what you choose to give. You lied to me. To all of us. You manufactured threats and imprisoned innocent wolves. That ends tonight." 3 of the 6 warriors lowered their guard, stepping away from Thorn. Their loyalty to their former Alpha outweighed their obedience to Council authority. Thorn's face twisted with rage. "Traitors, all of you!" He shifted, his wolf form exploding into being with practiced speed. Large and powerful and driven by desperation. He lunged not at Kane but at Sera, aiming for her throat, trying to eliminate the Luna touch threat before she could recover her strength. Kane intercepted. The 2 wolves collided in midair, fangs and claws seeking purchase. They crashed to the stone floor in a tangle of fur and fury. Kane was younger, stronger, but Thorn fought with the viciousness of someone who had nothing left to lose. Through pack bonds, Sera felt the battle above intensifying. Northern Coalition was pushing deeper into Steel Crest territory. They had minutes at most before the entire situation collapsed. "Go," Kane sent through the bond he still shared with her, thin and damaged but present. "Get them out. I will hold him." Sera wanted to argue, wanted to help, but she was responsible for 7 prisoners and 13 pack members who needed her to lead, not fight personal battles. "Marcus, James, move," she commanded. They ran. Behind them, Kane and Thorn fought with savage intensity. Ahead, the ventilation shaft beckoned like promise of freedom. The team climbed, prisoners going first with assistance, then the pack members, until only Sera remained at the bottom. She looked back once, saw Kane standing over Thorn's unconscious form, bloodied but alive. Their eyes met across the distance, Go, he said again, I will follow. Sera climbed. They emerged into chaos. Northern Coalition had broken through Steel Crest's defensive line and was flooding into the territory. Warriors fought in wolf form across the grounds. The healing house was burning. The Great Hall had been breached. Reed appeared with his team, securing the perimeter around the extraction point. Through here, quickly. They moved as one, 14 sanctuary wolves and 7 rescued prisoners, slipping through the battle like ghosts. Northern Coalition wolves spotted them, but recognized Luna-touched refugees and let them pass. Steelcrest defenders were too busy with the main assault to intercept. They reached the forest and kept running. 5 miles. 10. 15. Until the sounds of battle faded and only wilderness surrounded them. Sera finally allowed herself to stop, her legs giving out as exhaustion claimed her. She had pushed too far, given too much, held pack bonds and healing magic beyond what her body could sustain. She felt herself falling and distantly registered strong hands catching her. Sleep, Reed's voice said. You earned it. We have them. Mission complete. Consciousness slipped away like water through fingers, and Sera surrendered to the darkness. She woke 3 days later in the sanctuary's healing area, her body still weak but recovering. Mira sat beside her with relief flooding her features. Welcome back, the young healer said. You scared us. Channeling that much moon magic at once, maintaining 7 healing bonds while fighting silver-poisoning feedback? You should have died. But I did not, Sera managed, her voice rough from disuse. No, you did not. Because we performed the restoration ritual, all of us together. Sera's memory was fragmented, but pieces began surfacing. Being carried back to sanctuary. Wolves gathering in the sacred grove, the full moon blazing overhead. And then, warmth. Connection. Power flowing into her instead of out of her. Tell me, she said. Mira smiled. Reed knew an old ritual, one that your mother taught him years ago. When a Luna-touched wolf gives too much, when they drain themselves healing others, the pack can return the gift. We gathered at the pillars during the full moon. All of us. Your pack, the rescued prisoners, even Kane. We formed bonds and channeled our combined strength back into you. She gestured to the window where silver light still lingered despite 3 days passing. The moon held full for us. 3 nights instead of 1. Reed says the goddess herself blessed the healing because what you did, freeing those prisoners, it honored her gifts in the way they were meant to be used. Sera felt tears prick her eyes. The rescued prisoners helped heal me? Thomas insisted. Mira said gently. Said he had been helpless for 22 years while his daughter grew up alone. This was the first thing he could do for you. He would not be denied. None of them would. They poured everything they had into the bonds, gave back what you gave them. It was the most sacred exchange in Luna-touched tradition. Healing given and returned. Pack bonds used not for dominance or control, but for mutual support. The old magic working as it was always meant to work. Where is my father now? Sera asked. With Reed, learning to walk without chains, learning to be free. He asks to see you whenever you wake. Then help me stand, Sera said. I have been lying down long enough. Mira assisted her to sitting position, then to standing. Sera's legs trembled but held. She was weak but recovering. The moon healing had done its work. They found Thomas in the sacred grove, standing between the ancient pillars with his face turned toward the sky. Reed stood nearby, watchful but allowing the elder wolf his moment. When Thomas heard Sera approach, he turned with expression that held wonder. I had forgotten what sunlight felt like, he said quietly. 22 years in darkness. I thought I would die without seeing sky again. Sera moved to stand beside him. You are free now, we all are. Because of you, Thomas said. Because you refused to abandon us. Because you risked everything to prove that Luna-touched wolves take care of their own. They stood together in companionable silence while the sanctuary bustled with activity around them. The other rescued prisoners were integrating into pack life, learning to trust again, discovering that freedom was possible. Your mother would have done the same, Thomas said eventually. She believed that Luna-touched wolves were meant to be bridges, connections between all wolves. She tried to teach that vision before Council killed her for it. Then we build what she envisioned, Sera replied. We create the network she died trying to establish, and we make certain no Luna-touched wolf ever has to hide again. Thomas looked at his daughter with pride and grief and hope all mixed together. Tell me about her. About Liana. What do you remember? Sera hesitated. I remember almost nothing. Just fragments. The sound of her voice singing, the feeling of being held. And then she was gone, and I learned to forget, because remembering hurt too much. Thomas settled onto the ground, gesturing for Sera to join him. Then let me tell you about the wolf who was your mother. Let me give you back what counsel tried to take. He spoke for hours, painting picture of Sera Hartwell that Sera had never been allowed to know. A warrior who fought with precision and mercy. A healer who understood that medicine was about dignity as much as treatment. A visionary who saw potential for wolf society beyond dominance and submission. She believed Luna-touched wolves were gifts from the moon goddess, Thomas said, meant to show other wolves what was possible when connections were chosen rather than forced. She wanted to create network-spanning territories where wolves could support each other without requiring pack affiliation or submission to alpha authority. That is what we are building here, Sera said softly. The sanctuary, the rescued prisoners, the bonds we are forming. We are creating what she imagined. Yes, Thomas agreed. And she would be so proud that you did not just survive. You turned pain into purpose. You transformed betrayal into revolution. That is her legacy living through you. The moment was interrupted by pack bonds pulsing with alert. Sera felt it immediately. Multiple presences approaching sanctuary border. Not hostile, but significant. She rose quickly, Thomas following with movements growing steadier each day. They reached the border to find Catherine Voss arriving with unexpected guests. 10 wolves, Sera counted. All bearing the particular energy signature of Luna-touched bloodline. All watching her with mixture of hope and caution. Catherine stepped forward. They heard what you did, freeing the prisoners. They want to know if sanctuary is real. If Luna-touched wolves truly have place where they do not need to hide. Sera looked at the 10 arrivals, saw the same guarded hope she had carried for 23 years. Saw wolves who had learned to make themselves invisible. Saw potential waiting to be acknowledged. Sanctuary is real, she said clearly. And yes, you have place here. All of you. No submission required, no dominance hierarchy, just choice and connection. And the understanding that pack means supporting each other rather than controlling each other. One of the arrivals, a young female barely past her first shift, stepped forward hesitantly. Is it true you can teach us the old magic? The pack bonds and moon rituals? I can, Sera confirmed. My mother's mate has been teaching me everything he remembers. And we are recovering more knowledge from the rescued prisoners. We will teach you everything we know. No secrets, no hierarchy, just shared learning. The 10 wolves exchanged glances. Then one by one, they bowed their heads. Not submission, acknowledgement. Respect freely given rather than demanded. Welcome home, Sera said. You are pack now, and pack does not abandon its own. The prisoners? Recovering. Your father asked to see you whenever you wake. The others are weak but stable. They will heal. And Kane? Mira's expression shifted. He returned 2 days ago, wounded but alive. He is waiting outside if you want to see him. Sera considered. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain the distance she had built. But he had stood beside her when it mattered, had fought for her when he could have walked away. That counted for something. Send him in. Kane entered looking worse than she had ever seen him. Claw marks across his shoulder and face, old exhaustion in every line of his body. But his eyes were clear, no longer carrying the weight of lies and compromised loyalty. You held him, Sera said. Barely, Kane replied. Thorn fought like a cornered predator, but I managed to subdue him long enough for you to escape. Northern Coalition captured him afterward. They are holding him for trial. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them filled with history and hurt, and the tentative possibility of something new. I do not forgive you, Sera said finally. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did caused damage that cannot be undone with apologies or heroic acts. I know, Kane said quietly. But you stood with me when it counted. You chose right action over easy loyalty. You proved you learned something. That matters. What happens now? Now you continue proving it, Sera replied. Day after day, year after year. You build trust through sustained action, not grand gestures. You serve the sanctuary and the wolves here without expecting status or recognition. And maybe in time, we see if what was broken can be rebuilt into something different. I will spend my life proving I learned from my failures, Kane said. That your sacrifice meant something. Good, Sera told him, because we have work to do. 7 rescued prisoners need integration. Northern Coalition will want to negotiate about captured council members. And according to Reed, there are rumors of other Luna-touched wolves across the territories, hidden and waiting for someone to tell them it is safe to emerge. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. For what it is worth, watching you lead this operation taught me what I should have understood years ago. True alphas do not command through dominance. They inspire through example. You are the alpha I never managed to be. It was not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but it was truth, and that mattered. The trial of Elder Hollis Thorne was held in neutral territory 2 weeks later, witnessed by representatives from 7 packs and documented for historical record. Sera attended as representative of Luna-touched wolves and as daughter of the bloodline council had tried to exterminate. The evidence was overwhelming. Fabricated intelligence, imprisoned wolves, decades of experimentation and torture, war profiteering through manufactured crises. Thorne stood before the assembled judgment, still defiant despite everything. I did what was necessary to protect traditional pack structure, he declared. Luna-touched wolves are dangerous, uncontrollable. They had to be regulated for the safety of all wolves. Thomas Hartwell rose from his seat, still weak but standing through sheer determination. You did not regulate us. You tortured us. You murdered us. You experimented on us like we were less than wolves. My daughter spent 22 years in hiding because you decided her existence was threat. My mate died fighting to protect her. Explain to me how that was necessary. The silence that followed was damning. The sentence is life imprisonment, the Northern Coalition Alpha pronounced, assets seized and distributed to survivors, and complete documentation of council crimes made public record so that future generations understand the cost of measuring worth through control rather than consent. Thorne was led away still protesting, still certain of his righteousness, unable to comprehend that his certainty had been the problem. Sera watched him go and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just the hollow acknowledgement that justice delivered could not resurrect the dead or heal decades of trauma. But it could prevent repetition. The reconstruction took 6 months and transformed the sanctuary into something unprecedented in wolf society. Thomas Hartwell became historian, documenting the truth about Luna-touched bloodlines and council crimes with meticulous detail. He and Sera rebuilt their relationship slowly, learning each other as father and daughter, connected by blood and trauma and determination to honor Liana's sacrifice. The 7 rescued prisoners integrated into sanctuary life, each contributing unique skills and knowledge. The elderly female, whose name was Sarah Windcaller, knew rituals even Reed had not learned. The burned male, Marcus called him Silver despite the irony, became expert in training wolves to resist silver poisoning through controlled exposure. Mira became chief healer, her skills enhanced by techniques the rescued prisoners taught. Reed settled into elder advisor role, training the next generation while his body finally got the rest it had earned. Kane worked without complaint or expectation of recognition, proving through daily action that he had learned from failure. He and Sera maintained careful professional relationship, neither romantic nor hostile, built on mutual respect and the understanding that some wounds required years to heal. The sanctuary grew. Word spread about the place where Luna-touched wolves were not just tolerated, but celebrated, where hierarchy was chosen rather than enforced, where pack bonds mattered more than bloodline. Refugees arrived weekly. Some stayed. Others learned and returned to their packs to spread the knowledge. The network expanded organically, connecting wolves across territories through pack bonds and shared purpose. 6 months after the rescue, Sera stood in the sacred grove as the full moon rose. The 4 ancient pillars hummed with power, responding to the 43 wolves gathered in ceremony. Not just her original pack, not just the rescued prisoners, but new arrivals, refugees, believers in the possibility of different future. Thomas approached, moving more easily now that healing and proper food had restored some of his strength. Your mother would be proud beyond words. You did not just survive. You built something that will outlive us all. We built it, Sera corrected, all of us together. A pulse of energy swept through the sacred grove, making every wolf present gasp. Sera felt it through pack bonds, a massive surge of power from somewhere distant but connected. Reed appeared at her side, his expression amazed. Did you feel that? What was it? Sera closed her eyes. following the sensation through pack bonds, reaching beyond her immediate pack to the wider network they had been building. She found the source. Other Luna-touched wolves, she breathed. Not just one or two, dozens, across multiple territories. They felt our ceremony. They are reaching back through bonds. The implications were staggering. Luna-touched wolves could sense each other across vast distances, could establish bonds without physical proximity, could build network that spanned the known territories. How many? Thomas asked quietly. Sera concentrated, counting the distinct presences she could feel through the expanding web of connection. 43, she said. Exactly 43. Scattered across territories, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to show them they were not alone. She opened her eyes and looked at her father, at Reed, at Mira and Marcus, and all the wolves who had chosen to stand with her. We are building something unprecedented. Not just a sanctuary, a network. A new way for wolves to connect and support each other without requiring territory or hierarchy or traditional pack structure. What do we do? Reed asked. We invite them home, Sera said. We teach them what we have learned. We build what my mother died trying to create. And we prove that Luna-touched wolves are not threats to be eliminated, but bridges that can connect all wolves in ways hierarchy never could. She reached out through pack bonds, sending invitation across the network. To every Luna-touched wolf who could hear her. To refugees and prisoners and survivors who had spent lifetimes hiding what they were. Come home, she sent. You are not alone. We are pack, and pack does not abandon their own. The responses came like stars igniting across night sky. Acknowledgement, gratitude, hope, and the promise that they would come. Sera stood at the center of it all. Luna-touched conduit channeling power and connection across distances that should have been impossible. She felt her mother's legacy flowing through her, felt the future taking shape, felt the revolution that had started with one wolf kneeling in the rain, now spreading across territories like wildfire. The moon hung full and bright above them, bearing witness to a moment that would change everything. Sera looked at her pack, at the rescued prisoners, at the sanctuary that had grown beyond her wildest imaginings. She thought about the 43 wolves preparing to journey here, about the network they would build, about the future where Luna-touched wolves no longer needed to hide. Are you ready? She asked her pack through bonds. The response came as one voice, unified and absolute. We are pack. We are ready, no matter what comes. Sera smiled and turned her face to the moon, feeling its blessing settle over her like a mantle of starlight and purpose. The time for hiding was over. The time for building had arrived. And Luna-touched wolves would finally claim their place not as experiments or threats or casualties, but as bridges connecting all wolves in ways the old world had never imagined. The revolution that began in pain and betrayal would end in connection and choice, and the radical understanding that pack bonds freely chosen were stronger than any hierarchy enforced through dominance. They were Luna-touched, they were pack, and they were just beginning.